My father's first words on entering Westminster Abbey yesterday were a pledge of service, because for over 50 years in every corner of the UK, across the Commonwealth and around the world, at 35 years old, Sadie Rice, a former royal maid, has finally broken her silence on what life was really like, working behind the gates of Prince William and Duchess Catherine's private residence. Anmer Hall. What she reveals could change everything you thought you knew about the royal family. From what seemed like a dream job, working in the world's most prestigious household, to a nightmare that pushed her to leave after 2 years, Sadie's story is one that's shocking, eye-opening, and more relatable than you might think. But what exactly happened behind those grand walls? Why did this royal insider decide to walk away from the luxury of royal life? The royal dream job. An inside look at Anmer Hall. Anmer Hall, nestled in the serene English countryside, is home to Prince William and Duchess Catherine, a private residence that reflects the grandeur and elegance of the royal family. With 10 bedrooms, expansive gardens, and state-of-the-art amenities, it's a place fit for royalty. On the surface, working for such a prestigious family in such a beautiful home would seem like the ultimate dream job. Sadie Rice, who worked there for 2 years, found herself amidst this grandeur, quietly attending to the needs of the future King of England and his family. Her responsibilities included the everyday duties expected of a royal maid: cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, and organizing. For most people, such a position would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. However, behind the pristine walls of Anmer Hall, things weren't as fairy tale-like as they seemed. The glamorous image of working for royalty often masks the reality of long hours, constant pressure, and the blurred lines between work and personal life. Sadie was aware of these realities even before she began her work at Anmer Hall. She had a wealth of experience working in royal households, including Norway's, and even serving Queen Elizabeth herself. Her impeccable credentials made her a perfect fit for the job, yet no amount of experience could prepare her for the unique and demanding life behind the palace doors. Sadie's day began before the royal family woke, and often didn't end until long after they had retired for the evening. The work wasn't just physically demanding, it required emotional labor as well. Royal staff are expected to be invisible workers, always present when needed but never intruding. The duties of a royal maid extend far beyond typical cleaning jobs. Meals had to be prepared with precision, taking into account dietary preferences, allergies, and royal tastes. Laundry was far more than a simple chore. It involved handling garments worth thousands of pounds. With care, the house itself wasn't just a place to live. It was a historical estate, filled with priceless antiques that required constant attention. Despite the work being inherently demanding, Sadie began to feel that the expectations were rising steadily, with no room for her personal needs or time. What started as occasional requests soon became an avalanche of expectations. The family's move to Kensington Palace meant even more time away from her own life. Sadie was asked to split her time between Anmer Hall and Kensington Palace, reshaping her life entirely around the royal family's needs. Initially, Sadie made the effort to adjust, stretching her hours, rearranging personal plans, and continually pushing herself to meet the demands of the job. But over time, it became clear that the job was taking a toll on her personal life. Sadie had been working around the clock to maintain a flawless environment for the family, but with every passing day, she felt herself slipping further away from her own identity. There were missed birthdays, canceled family gatherings, and sacrificed personal time. Her workday was no longer limited to a set number of hours, but had evolved into an ever-expanding commitment that no longer allowed room for her to live outside of the palace. The feeling of losing herself to the demands of the royal family was something Sadie had trouble reconciling with. Even though she had always prided herself on her professional dedication, it wasn't just about working long hours. It was about being constantly at the beck and call of the royal family. The pressures of royal life are unique. There are no off days, there are no breaks, and the constant stream of events, state dinners, and public appearances require unwavering commitment. For someone like Sadie, who was always meticulous about her work, this reality was both frustrating and exhausting over time. The job began to feel less like a prestigious career and more like an unrelenting obligation. Sadie realized that no amount of salary or prestige could replace the toll it was taking on her mental and emotional well-being. The most painful part of this realization was that there was no room for error. Every day had to be flawless. Every task had to be executed perfectly. The slightest mistake could reflect badly on the royal family, and Sadie took this responsibility seriously. However, even with her best efforts, it was clear that no matter how hard she worked, there was always more to be done. No matter how much time she devoted to the royal family, there was always something else waiting for her attention. It was a constant cycle with no end in sight, and it was taking a toll on Sadie's happiness. The breaking point when enough was enough, the tipping point for Sadie, came after 2 years of what felt like endless service to the royal family. She had given her all, sacrificing her own time, energy, and personal life to ensure that the family's needs were met. Yet despite her dedication, she could not ignore the fact that she had completely lost herself. In the process, the job had transformed from a challenging but fulfilling career to a burdensome existence, where her every decision was made around the family's needs and priorities. The reality of what it meant to serve the royals wasn't what she had imagined when she first took the job. As the demands from the royal family continued to increase, so did the pressure on Sadie to meet them. There was always something that needed to be done. Whether it was preparing meals, managing the household staff, or handling last-minute changes to the royal family schedules, the role was all-encompassing. And it wasn't long before Sadie realized that her personal life was slipping away entirely. She wasn't just sacrificing time. She was sacrificing relationships, personal growth, and her sense of self. At the end of the day, she couldn't ignore the fact that she had no time for herself, no time to focus on her own needs, and no time to simply relax and recharge. Despite her best efforts to keep up, Sadie found herself at a breaking point. There were times when the work felt suffocating, and the personal sacrifices were too much to bear. For someone who had once thrived in the world of royal service, this realization was difficult to process. Her work had once been a passion, but now it felt like a never-ending obligation. It wasn't just about cooking or cleaning. It was about constantly giving of herself, without receiving anything in return. The emotional exhaustion that came with the job was equally as draining as the physical labor. It was at this point that Sadie made the decision to leave. Making the decision to resign was not easy. It meant leaving behind a position that many people would covet, a prestigious job that many others could only dream of. It meant stepping away from the glamour and historical significance of serving the royal family. But at the end of the day, Sadie realized that her own well-being and happiness were far more important than any job or public image. It was a decision made out of necessity, not anger. Sadie had to prioritize her personal health and happiness over a position that, while prestigious, had begun to consume her life entirely. Her resignation wasn't made in a moment of anger or frustration. It was made after careful thought about what she had gained from the job versus what she had lost. Sadie didn't see her decision as a failure. Rather, it was a reclaiming of her identity and personal time. The royal family's needs, while important, could no longer dictate the course of her life. Her departure was a clear statement that no job, no matter how prestigious, should come at the cost of your personal well-being. The emotional burden of living in service to others, needs for an extended period of time, had finally taken its toll on Sadie. It wasn't a decision to leave behind her job. It was a decision to take back her life, serving the royals. Working for a royal family is often painted as a dream job. For many, it's an opportunity to witness history firsthand, serve powerful figures, and enjoy a level of prestige few will ever experience. However, as Sadie Rice's story reveals, the emotional and mental toll of this line of work is rarely discussed or acknowledged. The truth behind royal service is far more complex and demanding than what's portrayed on the surface. While it may seem like a job of luxury and exclusivity, the reality is that the job doesn't just take your time, it takes pieces of your soul. Sadie's experience wasn't just about fulfilling the physical tasks required in a royal household. It wasn't just the hours spent cooking, cleaning, or shopping. The real challenge lay in the mental and emotional labor of being constantly on. When you work for the royal family, your personal emotions, concerns, and stress are not only expected to be kept in check, they're supposed to be invisible. You are a servant meant to maintain composure, no matter the circumstances. But this level of emotional suppression and constant surveillance takes its toll over time. Imagine working in an environment where every action, every word, and every move is scrutinized. When you serve the royal family, your personal life is supposed to take a backseat. Sadie's job wasn't just about cleaning or preparing meals. It was about keeping the household running smoothly, anticipating needs before they were voiced, and constantly balancing the emotional undercurrents of a family under public scrutiny. There was no room for personal error or fatigue. The job demanded constant attention, not just to physical tasks, but to emotional needs as well. The royal family's mood, stress levels, and concerns became intertwined with her own. One of the most difficult parts of Sadie's job was managing her own emotions while dealing with the stress of working in such a high-pressure environment. She had to be the calm in the storm, always pleasant, always efficient, and always prepared to meet the royal family's needs. But what happens when that calm facade starts to crack? What happens when the pressure of constantly living up to such high expectations takes its toll on a person's mental health? Sadie's story sheds light on a reality that is rarely seen by the public: the emotional labor that comes with working for royalty. This mental and emotional burden became harder to ignore as time went on. As Sadie adjusted her schedule to fit the increasing demands of the family, the lines between work and personal life began to blur. There was no longer a 9-to-5 schedule. Work began to spill into every aspect of her life. Personal relationships were strained, and the ability to maintain a social life outside of work became increasingly difficult. Over time, these strains created a sense of isolation. Sadie wasn't just missing time with friends and family. She was missing out on her own life. The emotional exhaustion that came with trying to maintain perfection in an environment that demanded more than could reasonably be expected was undeniable. It wasn't just about meeting the royal family's expectations. It was about constantly suppressing her own needs, emotions, and personal desires. This level of emotional suppression isn't sustainable for anyone, especially not for someone as dedicated and hardworking as Sadie. Eventually, the cumulative effects of these emotional demands left her feeling drained and unfulfilled, which is what led to her decision to resign. By leaving her position with the royal family, Sadie took a brave step toward reclaiming her own sense of self. She made the difficult decision to prioritize her emotional and mental well-being over the glamour and prestige that came with working in the royal household. Sadie's story is a reminder that, despite the outward appearances of wealth and luxury, the emotional and mental toll of working in such an environment can be incredibly taxing. The expectations placed on staff, especially in royal households, are more than just physical. They extend into the emotional and psychological realms, creating an environment where personal sacrifices are expected without any consideration for the personal cost. The real cost of serving royalty. When Sadie Rice walked away from her prestigious position, serving Prince William and Duchess Catherine, It wasn't just a decision to leave a job. It was a decision to reclaim her life. But what was the true cost of serving royalty? And why did it take her 2 years to reach this breaking point? The truth about royal service goes far beyond the physical demands of keeping a palace clean or preparing meals for a family. The real cost lies in the personal sacrifices that staff members make every day. Sacrifices that are rarely acknowledged or seen by the public from the outside looking in. It's easy to romanticize what it means to serve royalty. The idea of working in a palace, serving a royal family, and witnessing history in the making seems like a glamorous job. But for Sadie, that glamour faded quickly as the demands of the job began to outweigh the benefits. Working for the royal family meant giving up personal time, sacrificing personal relationships, and surrendering parts of her life that she could never get back. It meant that her own needs, desires, and dreams took a backseat to the demands of a royal household. The job began to consume her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. Sadie wasn't just expected to carry out tasks for Prince William and Duchess Catherine. She was expected to anticipate their every need, to be available at all times, and to constantly sacrifice her personal life for the family's comfort. This meant giving up weekends with family, canceling plans with friends, and missing out on special moments in her own life. The demands never stopped. At first, these sacrifices were manageable. They seemed like small trade-offs in exchange for the prestige of working for such a high-profile family. But as time went on, the demands grew, and Sadie realized that her life was no longer her own. The lines between work and personal time became completely blurred, and what was once a fulfilling career began to feel like a never-ending obligation. The emotional toll was the most significant cost. The role of a royal staff member is not simply about carrying out physical tasks. It's about maintaining a sense of calm, discretion, and professionalism at all times. Sadie was expected to maintain composure and remain invisible to the royal family unless needed. This meant suppressing any personal struggles, stress, or concerns in order to ensure that the royal family's needs were met over time. This emotional suppression began to take a toll on her mental well-being. This constant suppression of personal needs, coupled with the ever-growing demands of the job, led Sadie to a breaking point. The royal family's expectations were not just physical. They were emotional and psychological as well. It wasn't just about cooking meals or cleaning rooms. It was about being a presence in the royal family's life without ever truly being seen. It was about giving everything to the family and receiving little in return. The more Sadie gave, the more the family's demands increased. And eventually, she realized she had nothing left to give. When Sadie finally decided to leave, it wasn't just about walking away from a job. It was about walking away from a system that expected too much and offered too little. Her resignation was a brave declaration of independence, a decision to prioritize her own well-being over the ever-increasing demands of royal service. In doing so, Sadie not only reclaimed her personal life, but also challenged the deeply ingrained system of sacrifice and loyalty that defines royal service. Her decision speaks volumes about the true cost of serving royalty, and it highlights the need for a shift in how staff members are treated. In such high-pressure environments, loyalty, sacrifice, and expectations, royal service may seem like a glamorous profession. Cleaning the halls of palaces, preparing meals for royalty, and taking part in history. However, as Sadie Rice's story so vividly highlights, the reality behind these roles is far more complex and demanding than anyone could imagine. Being part of a royal household isn't just about performing a set of tasks, it's about surrendering a significant portion of your life and identity. The role of a maid in the royal family doesn't just require physical labor, it demands emotional resilience, psychological endurance, and unflinching loyalty. Loyalty is one of the primary qualities expected from staff members in royal households. But This loyalty doesn't just apply to performing the job. Well, it extends to personal sacrifice. When you work for a royal family, your personal time is not your own. The job doesn't just come with fixed hours. The concept of time off is often non-existent. You're always expected to be on call, always ready to accommodate the needs of the royals, even when those needs seem unreasonable or disruptive. Sadie's story reveals just how much of a sacrifice this kind of loyalty can be. Over time, it erodes your ability to maintain a work-life balance, and soon your personal life becomes secondary to the family's needs. Sadie's journey began, like many others, in royal service, with a sense of excitement and pride. Working for Prince William and Duchess Catherine was an opportunity many would covet. But as the demands of the job increased, the toll on Sadie became more apparent. What began as occasional requests for extra hours or additional duties quickly snowballed into a relentless cycle of work that consumed her time, energy, and emotions. The expectations placed on her were no longer just about performing her job efficiently, they were about her loyalty to the family, about always saying yes and making personal sacrifices for the sake of the royal image. In the early days, Sadie felt that this was part of the job, something she had signed up for. After all, she was working for one of the most famous families in the world, and the prestige that came with that role was undeniable. However, as the years passed, the weight of the loyalty demanded from her began to feel overwhelming. Sadie had to adapt to the royal family's rhythms, adjusting her life to fit around their unpredictable schedules. This was not a role that left room for personal spontaneity. Family gatherings, vacations, and even spontaneous nights out with friends became rare. Slowly, Sadie's identity began to blend into her role. She wasn't just a maid, she was an invisible servant who existed to meet the royal family's needs without complaint. The loyalty required by a royal family is, in essence, a contract that extends beyond professional duties. It requires emotional sacrifice, personal adjustment, and a willingness to put the family's interests above your own. For Sadie, this became increasingly difficult to reconcile. The tipping point came when she realized that she was no longer living her life. Her personal desires, relationships, and dreams had been put on hold for too long. The sheer emotional and physical drain of the job was unsustainable, and eventually she made the difficult decision to leave. However, what sets Sadie's story apart is the complexity of her relationship with the royal family. Unlike what many might expect, Sadie's decision to leave wasn't due to malice or negative feelings toward Prince William or Duchess Catherine. In fact, she described them as kind employers who were aware of the demands placed on her. But even their understanding couldn't change the fundamental issue. The job was too much. Sadie wasn't angry with them. She was simply recognizing that her loyalty to them had come at the expense of her own happiness and well-being. It wasn't just the royal family who was demanding more. It was the system itself, the centuries-old tradition of royal service that placed such high expectations on those who served them. Ultimately, Sadie's story highlights the emotional and psychological cost of royal service. It sheds light on the often unspoken demands placed on staff who work behind the scenes. While the public may see the royal family as gracious and generous, the pressure placed on their employees can be overwhelming. The story of Sadie Rice is a rare glimpse into the complex world of royal service, where loyalty and sacrifice often come at a steep personal price. The decision to walk away, leaving a prestigious role in a royal household, is no easy decision, especially when you've spent years giving your time and energy to an institution that many dream of serving. But for Sadie Rice, the decision to walk away from her position with Prince William and Duchess Catherine was ultimately about reclaiming her life. After 2 years of working for the royal family, Sadie had to make a choice: continue sacrificing her personal happiness for the job, or take the difficult step of walking away to preserve her well-being and future. The decision to resign was not one that Sadie made lightly. It wasn't just a matter of quitting a job. It was a life-altering move that would force her to confront the realities of life outside the royal bubble. By leaving the Cambridge household, she was stepping away from a life of prestige, comfort, and connection to history. But she was also stepping away from the intense, emotional, mental, and physical demands of the role. It was a decision that required great courage and a willingness to face the unknown. When Sadie handed in her resignation, it was a statement not just about her job, but about her need for personal freedom. She had been pushed to the limit by the relentless demands of the job, the constant requests for extra hours, the lack of personal space, and the ever-present pressure to meet the royal family's expectations had taken a toll on her. By stepping away from the role, Sadie was reclaiming control over her time, her energy, and her own life. This decision wasn't about turning her back on the royal family. It was about choosing herself. The emotional burden of working for the royals was immense. Sadie's job required not just physical labor, but emotional labor as well. She had to remain composed, pleasant, and efficient no matter the circumstances. Behind the polished walls of royal service, she was expected to put the needs of others before her own day in and day out. This constant emotional suppression, coupled with the physical demands of the job, left little room for her own needs and desires. Sadie's decision to walk away was an acknowledgement that she had given everything she could, and it was time for her to live a life that was truly her own. However, despite the difficulty of leaving such a prestigious role, Sadie's resignation also opened the door to new opportunities. She wasn't without skills or experience, and she knew that her time in the royal household had prepared her for a wide range of career possibilities. The challenge was no longer about finding a job. It was about finding a job that allowed her to maintain the boundaries that were necessary for her own happiness. Sadie's story is a testament to the importance of preserving one's personal identity, even in the face of overwhelming external expectations. As Sadie began to rebuild her life, she learned how to balance work and personal life in a way that was healthy and sustainable. The experience taught her valuable lessons about the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing her own well-being. While it wasn't easy to walk away from the comfort and prestige of royal service, it was ultimately a decision that allowed her to reclaim her sense of self and create a life that reflected her true desires. What comes after leaving the royal household? When Sadie Rice resigned from her position working for Prince William and Duchess Catherine, it wasn't just a career change. It was a life-altering decision. Leaving behind the royal household meant stepping away from a world of prestige and history, but it also meant stepping into a world of freedom and self-discovery. The transition from a life of constant service to a life of personal independence came with its own challenges, but it also opened doors to new opportunities. After leaving the royal household, Sadie found herself at a crossroads. She had spent 2 years serving one of the most famous families in the world, and now she had to navigate a completely different life. No longer bound by the rigid schedules of royal service, Sadie suddenly had the freedom to make her own choices. She could spend time with family and friends, explore new career opportunities, and prioritize her own needs for the first time in years. But the transition wasn't easy. For years, Sadie had been living under the strict demands of the royal family, and now she had to adjust to a more flexible and independent lifestyle. One of the first things Sadie did after leaving the royal family service was to reconnect with the people she had neglected. During her time at Anmer Hall and Kensington Palace, she spent more time with family and friends, rebuilding relationships that had been put on hold for far too long. This new chapter allowed her to rediscover herself and embrace the freedom she had once lost. But even with the newfound freedom, Sadie remained discreet about her time with the royal family. Despite her decision to speak out about the demands of royal life, she still maintained a level of professionalism and respect for the family she had served. While Sadie's departure marked the end of one chapter, it also signaled the beginning of a new and exciting phase of her life. She was no longer just a royal servant. She was a woman reclaiming her independence and pursuing her own dreams with the skills and experiences she had gained during her time in royal service. Sadie had the tools to succeed in a variety of fields. She wasn't short of employment opportunities, but she chose to take her time and carefully consider her next steps. This period of reflection and self-discovery was a critical part of her journey. Ultimately, Sadie's decision to break her silence about the royal household wasn't about revenge or scandal. It was about honesty. She wanted the public to understand what it was really like behind the palace doors, not just the glittering image that the royal family projects. Her decision to speak out wasn't about tarnishing the reputation of Prince William or Duchess Catherine. It was about shedding light on the sacrifices and challenges that come with serving royalty. Sadie's story is an important reminder that even the most glamorous positions come with their own set of challenges and demands. The cost of serving royalty is high, and sometimes it takes walking away from it all to realize what's truly important. For Sadie, that moment of realization came when she finally made the decision to leave the royal household and take back control of her life. Her decision to speak out and share her story is an important step toward understanding the hidden costs of royal service, and it raises questions about the balance between loyalty and self-preservation in such high-pressure environments. And that's the shocking story of Sadie Rice and her decision to leave royal service. Was it the right move to prioritize her well-being, or did she give up something too valuable? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more surprising stories like this one. Stay tuned for more.